Spider-Man was never really about the spider at all. Peter Parker got bitten in 1962, but Uncle Ben still died, and that guilt built the entire mask. Swap the species, swap the century, swap the man, and the same grief keeps showing back up wearing red and blue. That's why today I'm breaking down all 8 major Spider-Man variants and what actually makes each one worthy of the name, starting with the broke Queens teenager who started this whole debt in the first place. Peter Parker. Amazing Fantasy Thutcher 15 gave Spider-Man his entire origin in 11 pages. Cover dated August 1962. The anthology series was canceled right after this issue shipped, and Stan Lee later said that was the only reason he got to use Spider-Man, though the issue's own editorial page had already promised the character would return. With a cancellation looming, Stan Lee and Steve Ditko took a chance. A teenager in the lead role, not a sidekick. Peter Benjamin Parker was a high schooler in Queens, raised by his Aunt May and Uncle Ben after his parents died in a plane crash. A field trip to a science exhibit put him in the path of a freshly irradiated spider, and the bite gave him proportional strength, the ability to stick to walls, and a warning system Lee called Spider Sense. Many origin stories would have stopped there. Powers acquired, hero created. This one keeps going for one more page, and that page may be the single biggest reason the character survived 60+ years of publication. Peter uses his new abilities to make money as a wrestler and television performer. A robber runs past him backstage, and Peter steps aside, letting the man go, the narration painting a kid too wrapped up in his own cash to bother with a stranger's trouble. Days later, that same robber breaks into the Parker house and kills Uncle Ben. The narration box on the final page reads, "With great power there must also come great responsibility," and that single line becomes the defining ethos of the character going forward. Peter had the power to stop a stranger in a hallway and chose the money instead, and Uncle Ben paid for that choice with his life. The rent checks Peter fails to make, the dates he misses to fight Dr. Octopus, the nights lost to the Vulture circling Queens, all read as echoes of that one hallway decision. That debt drives the early comics. Peter is broke enough that a landlord threatens eviction while he's out stopping the Green Goblin. He's bullied by Flash Thompson in the same week he's saving the city. He works as a photographer selling pictures of himself to J. Jonah Jameson, who prints them next to editorials calling Spider-Man a menace. Later versions of Peter graduate past the photography desk entirely. He teaches high school science, leads the Avengers, and eventually runs his own company as CEO of Parker Industries. Fans have long argued about which version counts as peak Spider-Man, the broke photographer, the married Peter, the CEO, and the argument itself hints at something. The costume followed every job, age, and income bracket, while the debt stayed constant. Queens made that formula famous, but a formula can be handed down. What happens to that debt when the kid carrying it dies at 16? And a completely different kid in a completely different universe wakes up with the mask, the powers, and grief he never earned. Miles Morales. A 13-year-old boy puts on a dead teenager's costume, and a vocal chunk of the Marvel fanbase spends the next few years arguing about whether he's allowed to. Ultimate Peter Parker dies at 16, killed defending Aunt May and Gwen Stacy from the Osborn family's mess, and the funeral draws half of Manhattan. Miles Morales attends the funeral, not yet knowing he is about to inherit both the job and the grief. Miles debuts in Ultimate Fallout number 4, October 2011, courtesy of Brian Michael Bendis and Sarah Pacelli, built for Marvel's Ultimate Universe on Earth 1610. The bite comes from Spider-42, a lab animal cooked up inside Norman Osborn's Oz formula experiments, and it happens at his uncle Aaron Davis's apartment, from a spider Aaron unknowingly carried home after robbing Oscorp. Same radioactive premise as Peter, filtered through a stolen lab animal and a family secret instead of a school field trip. The powers land close enough to feel familiar and different enough to feel like an upgrade. Wall crawling, the strength, the reflexes, all present. Then a bioelectric venom blast that can drop a grown man, camouflage that turns him fully invisible, and later a mega venom blast that can level a room. Peter's toolkit never included any of that. What Miles does with the mask is the part that actually matters. He chooses it, deliberately, to honor a boy he'd never spoken to, wearing a name and a symbol that belonged to a stranger's sacrifice rather than his own. Aunt May recognizes him for it eventually. Gwen Stacy does too. That's the whole trick this franchise keeps pulling. The one Peter's radioactive bite planted back in Section 1. The debt survives the man who owed it, picked up by whoever is standing closest when it falls. Then Marvel does something no comic event usually survives doing cleanly. Secret Wars hits in 2015, universes collide and get rebuilt, and instead of erasing Miles, the writers fold him straight into Earth 616, the main continuity, right alongside the original Peter Parker. 2 Spider-Men, same universe, same city, neither one written out to make room for the other. 3 years later, Into the Spider-Verse wins the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature and turns a kid from a Brooklyn housing project into a globally recognized character. Here's what that actually proves. A second person put on the mask, kept his own powers, his own family, his own generation, and the title held, nobody got demoted. The suit stretched to fit a second body, proof that whatever the spider actually made belonged to more than Peter Parker alone. One universe proved the mask fits a new person, but the swap can go further than a new wearer. What happens when the bite lands on the friend history says was supposed to die in Peter's arms, and she is the one left holding his body? Spider-Gwen. Gwen Stacy's reward for surviving her most famous death is watching Peter Parker die in her arms and getting blamed for the body. That reversal powers Earth-65. The spider bites Gwen, giving her the abilities and the mask, while Peter remains the lonely kid who wants to stop feeling powerless. He creates a formula, transforms into the lizard, and attacks Midtown High's prom. Gwen defeats him. The transformation fades, and Peter dies after telling her he wanted to be special like her. Pretty successful prom then. She debuted as a spider hero in Edge of Spider-Verse 2, cover dated September 2014. Inside her world, she operates as Spider-Woman. Fans widely call her Spider-Gwen because Marvel already had several Spider-Women, and apparently the multiverse needed a filing system. The nickname caught on so thoroughly that Marvel eventually embraced it, titling her longest-running series Spider-Gwen. The costume helped. White hood, black bodysuit, pink webbing inside the arms, turquoise shoes. It reads clearly from across a convention hall and became one of Marvel's most distinctive modern designs and a popular choice for cosplay. Her popularity also escaped the event that created her. Marvel gave Gwen multiple ongoing series, crossover appearances, and an entire corner of Earth-65 to keep warping familiar characters around her. Matt Murdock becomes a Kingpin-aligned criminal operator, smiling through the sort of legal ethics seminar that ends with 3 witnesses missing. Captain George Stacy remains a police officer, except his target is Spider-Woman. He wants to capture the masked vigilante blamed for Peter's death while trying to protect Gwen. Unaware they occupy the same hoodie. Then Gwen reveals herself. George has to process his daughter, his fugitive, and his idea of justice standing in one room. Gwen wants her father's trust, yet the secret forces him to choose between his badge and the child underneath the mask. Peter Parker spent his life paying forward Uncle Ben's death. Gwen inherits the same debt with the names reversed, carrying Peter's final words while his face appears on the tragedy attached to hers. The Spider-Verse films understood that this reversal deserved more than a supporting cameo. Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse treat Gwen as an equal co-lead, give her a band and drums, and preserve the punk energy built into her comics. Even her watercolor universe changes around her emotions. Because subtle family communication has left the building, read the reversal straight and one conclusion holds up. Main universe Gwen became the girl whose death defined Peter's failure. Earth-65 lets her survive, hands Peter the fatal fall, and leaves Gwen holding him. Afterward, the victim becomes the protagonist, while survival becomes its own punishment. Miles proved the mask could transfer to another person. Gwen makes that transfer crueler. The wound can reverse who lives, who dies, and who carries the blame. Yet grief still produces a spider hero. Push that origin 100 years forward into a corporate city, and the bite becomes deliberate. Someone rewrites a man's DNA because his body belongs on a balance sheet. Spider-Man 2099 and Spider-Man's powers became the accidental product of a corporate genetic program, and Miguel turned against the company that made him. Earlier versions received the spider through luck, tragedy, or some deeply irresponsible laboratory safety. Miguel O'Hara gets his from an employer treating human genetics like software it can rewrite, patent, and deploy. Miguel debuted in 1992's Spider-Man 2099-01, part of Marvel's futuristic 2099 line. He's the Spider-Man of Earth 928, an Irish-Mexican geneticist living in Nueva York, where corporations have swallowed the functions of government. Miguel works for Alchemax, developing genetically enhanced corporate soldiers. When he tries to quit, Executive Tyler Stone secretly doses him with Rapture, an addictive drug engineered to bind with the user's DNA. Very normal exit interview. Miguel attempts to purge the drug by restoring his original genetic code. A jealous coworker sabotages the machine, adding spider DNA to the procedure. The process rewrites 50% of Miguel's genetic structure with spider genes. Peter got bitten once. Miguel basically got dragged through the spider settings menu while somebody clicked Apply to All. The result looks considerably less friendly. Miguel grows retractable talons on his fingers and toes, fangs capable of delivering paralyzing venom, enhanced vision, increased strength, speed, and forearm spinnerets that produce organic webbing. His eyes become so light-sensitive that he wears tinted glasses to avoid revealing the mutation. Each power turns his body into evidence of what Alchemax did to him. His suit matches the colder future around him, The dark blue costume carries a red, skull-like spider emblem, while the web cape uses light-bite fabric to catch air and let him glide between Nueva York's towers. It looks ceremonial, predatory, and slightly like Death opened a cybersecurity consultancy. The design makes Miguel instantly recognizable while preserving the basic shape of Spider-Man underneath all that corporate neon. Personality creates the sharper break. Miguel is cynical, abrasive, and perfectly willing to tell people when their plan is stupid, often while they're still explaining it. Yet responsibility keeps finding him. He fights the corporation that exploited him, protects people crushed beneath Nueva York's hierarchy, and repeatedly gets shoved toward leadership despite having the bedside manner of an angry vending machine. Peter spends his life paying for one selfish choice. Miguel inherits a manufactured wound and chooses to make Alchemax pay instead. Across the Spider-Verse pushes that instinct to its harshest point. The 2023 film makes Miguel leader of the Spider Society, policing canon events across dimensions and treating Miles Morales as a threat to reality. His evidence comes from a universe he accidentally destabilized after replacing a dead version of himself, costing that world its existence. Grief becomes policy. Miguel responds to one catastrophic loss by building an institution designed to control everybody else's choices. That supports both sides of the fan argument. Miguel reads as a tragic hardliner carrying impossible stakes, while his pursuit of Miles pushes him frighteningly close to villain territory. The film intensifies traits already present in the character: certainty, aggression, control, and a willingness to carry the burden for everyone. His compassion has curdled into enforcement. The mask survives, but its responsibility can harden into the exact authority Peter Parker spent his life resisting. So far, somebody decent has remained under the mask, however damaged. Give the healthy body, the powers, and the heroic name to a lifelong enemy, though, and he may decide he can perform Peter Parker's responsibility better than Peter ever could. Superior Spider-Man. Fans still argue whether Otto Octavius ran the job better than Peter Parker ever did, even though Otto began his run hating Peter Parker and ended it respecting him. That's Dr. Octopus himself, walking around in Peter's body for over a year of publishing, daring the book to compare his methods with the man who invented the job. The swap happens across the Amazing Spider-Man 698 through 700 in 2012 and 2013. Otto, dying, forces a mind transfer that puts his consciousness into Peter's healthy body and dumps Peter into his own failing one. Peter dies, trapped inside a stranger's collapsing organs, watching his own life continue without him, powerless to stop it. Otto keeps the face, the apartment, the ant, and starts fighting crime in a body that isn't his, in a life he stole outright. Peter's memories flood in anyway, uninvited, relentless. The uncle, the choice, the debt somebody keeps paying even after the man who owed it has already been murdered by the one now wearing his skin. Otto answers that haunting by declaring himself superior, and the name lands like a threat. Lethal force against villains who used to walk free. Spider-bots patrolling the city and feeding Otto constant surveillance data, and Parker Industries built from nothing into a company arming police and other heroes with his own gadgets and analytics. And it works, at least on the surface. Across the Superior Spider-Man run 2013 into 2014, Otto beats Kingpin. He fights the Green Goblin, but the Goblin eventually defeats him at the climax of the Goblin Nation storyline. Two enemies Peter had battled repeatedly across the years, often at devastating cost, now turn the mask into a very unpleasant group project. Crime appears to drop across the city. Villains Otto catches stay caught, while other heroes recoil from the brutality, uneasy, with the man wearing their friend's face. Then the Green Goblin builds an empire right under the Spider-Bots. Great, add that to the efficiency report. Look at the numbers honestly, and a case builds itself, whether anyone wants to admit it. If you tally the damage, Otto's methods appear to leave fewer villains free to strike again, at least on paper. You could argue compassion cost Peter fights over and over for years. Otto won more ruthlessly, one broken villain at a time, until the Green Goblin broke him. Peter's memories had been haunting Otto from the beginning, and they eventually become something more difficult than an obstacle. Peter clings to a sliver of consciousness buried inside his own stolen mind, fighting for control from somewhere Otto can't fully see. Near the end, Otto realizes he cannot win, cedes control to Peter, and restores his consciousness so Peter can finish the fight Otto started. The killer returns the debt to the one man on Earth who actually owes it. So the mask holds even when a killer wears it, even when the man underneath spent a year plotting how to keep it. Now, stop asking who the person under the mask is, and start asking what happens when there is barely a person there at all, when the whole tragic origin gets played for laughs in a universe where the hero is a cartoon animal, Spider-Ham. A radioactive pig bit a spider, and Marvel still logged it as a real origin story. That's the joke, and the point in the same sentence. Peter Porker debuts in November 1983 in Marvel Tales, starring Peter Porker, the spectacular Spider-Ham #1 on Earth 8311, a cartoon universe where Captain America is a cat and most mainstream heroes get run through a barnyard filter. The formula that killed Uncle Ben and reshaped Miles Morales gets fed backwards here. Same radioactive logic, same superhero vocabulary, completely different animal standing at the center of it. The pig bites the spider. May Porker, a radioactive sow, sinks her teeth into an ordinary spider, and the transformation runs in reverse. The spider becomes the one with a face, a name, and a mantle, while the pig supplies the powers. He keeps the name Peter Porker anyway, as if Marvel wanted you to recognize what you were looking at even upside down. Peter Parker gets a spider. Peter Porker gets a spider bite delivered by a pig and carries on as if the paperwork had been filed correctly. Fine detail. He headlines his own solo stories and comedic backups for decades, cracking jokes at the fourth wall, tripping over his own cape, and still saving people on panel after panel. He does what Peter Parker does. He does what Miles does. He does what a T-Rex will apparently do 66 million years from whenever this video finishes airing. Slapstick physics. Same job description. The costume can stretch, the dialogue can wink, and the universe can behave like a Saturday morning cartoon, yet the responsibility stays recognizable. Someone is in trouble. Peter shows up, and the joke has to keep moving while the rescue happens. Into the Spider-Verse hands him the widest audience he's ever had in 2018, dropping him into a CG film built on photorealistic rain and skyline shots, and letting him bounce around it with the squash and stretch elasticity of a 1940s cartoon short. He's drawn like Bugs Bunny standing next to a security camera. The audience took it in stride. Audiences largely accepted a cartoon pig as one more legitimate answer to the question the whole movie is asking. The contrast lands instantly. Rain glistens on the buildings. Portals tear through reality. And then, a pig launches himself into the scene like gravity has personally offended him. Pulling that off is harder than the tone lets on. The character supports two honest readings, as pure comic relief dropped in to cut the tension of a multiversal war, or as a genuine Spider-Man, since the story never asks him to prove it twice. That overuse argument has teeth. Stack him into 3 consecutive crossover events and the joke starts working overtime, covering for stakes the story needed treated straight. His power comes from the exact balance between absurd presentation and sincere purpose. Push the absurdity too far and Peter Porker becomes a mascot. Keep the rescue work visible and the pig earns the mask all over again. The canon largely leaves the question open. Spiders, man. Peter Parker died in this reality, and the swarm that ate him showed up afterward wearing his face. The original spider bite is supposed to change one man. In Earth 1580, the bite turns into a meal, and the man never gets back up. During a Horizon Labs tour with Max Modell and Gwen Stacy, Peter leaned over a railing that broke and fell straight into a pit of radiation-bombarded spiders. The spiders skipped the bite entirely and went straight into consumption, swallowing Peter whole and absorbing his consciousness and memories in the process. Thousands of individual bodies came out the other side sharing his memories, his face, and his conviction that they were Peter Parker, which is a lot like a swarm of bees agreeing to fly in the shape of a mailman. Every other origin on this list bends the formula. This one just eats it. The body that results looks like Spider-Man from a distance. Red and blue suit, familiar silhouette, the same crouch on rooftops. Get close, and the illusion gets a lot more literal. Individual spiders can peel off the mass, crawl away independently, and crawl back later to rebuild the shape, which means the man swinging between buildings is actually a temporary agreement among thousands of arachnids about what form to hold. Canon gives us a hive mind carrying Peter's consciousness and memories. Read through the horror of that mechanism. The line between a person and a colony, convinced it is, one gets genuinely hard to find. That gives Spider-Man an alien, morally ambiguous mindset, because his human identity lives inside a crowd that can literally scatter across the ground. The costume provides the outline. The hive supplies everything moving inside it. A pig already proved earlier in this list that the mask fits any face you put under it. This swarm suggests the mask may only need a shape, held together by thousands of spiders sharing the belief that they're Peter. Nothing in the Spider-Verse material confirms how much of the real Peter Parker survived the swallowing, whether some genuine fragment of him is still steering, or whether the spiders simply learned to imitate a dead man well enough to fool everyone, including themselves. Fans still argue about how much of Peter is left despite his thin page count. He reads less like a hero who lost his humanity and more like a haunting that decided to fight crime. The swarm retained Peter's sense of responsibility. That burden now moves through a body built from thousands of separate organisms. It can break apart across the floor, gather itself again, and keep wearing the face of the person it devoured. The original Peter paid for this identity with his life, while the resulting hive carries the responsibility it absorbed from him. Lose the man, and you still get Spider-Man. So there is one wall left to test. Take the origin back before New York existed, before people existed, 66 million years before Queens, and see whether that same sense of responsibility can still build a hero out of whatever is standing there. Spider Rex. 66 million years before Queens exists, a Tyrannosaurus Rex accidentally kills two innocent bystanders through carelessness and decides that's his fault. His name is Terp Tarker, yes, with two silent P's, because Marvel took the alliteration of Peter Parker and dragged it through paleontology until it screamed. He fights under the name Spider Rex, and every part of that title, the name, the costume, the concept, is doing exactly the work you think it's doing. The origin holds together better than the name suggests. A radioactive meteorite containing alien spiders strikes Tur directly, causing a body swap that gives him spider powers. His carelessness later crushes two innocent dinosaurs, and that guilt becomes his responsibility moment for everything that follows. The combination leaves him a nearly 8-ton predator with web-slinging ability and reflexes fast enough to dodge threats an ordinary Rex could never see coming. He carries the red and blue costume pattern painted directly onto Tyrannosaurus hide. He fights dinosaur-scale villains in a prehistoric setting built specifically to hold him, complete with its own rogues gallery scaled to match his size. This origin plays completely straight, which is what makes it land like a dare somebody actually accepted. Add that to a growing pile. A pig already wore the mask, a car already drove it, a cyborg already replaced the whole nervous system underneath it. This is the entry where the dare finally lands on a completely different species, a different geological era, a body with teeth the size of bananas, and zero interest in photography. Some fans treat Spider Rex as the punchline that proves Marvel exhausted every reasonable idea and kept going anyway, while others embrace him as so ridiculous, he works. That reading holds up on the surface. Look at what survives the joke, though, and a different picture forms. Strip Peter Parker's skin, his city, his century, even his species, and the machine underneath keeps running on the same fuel. Guilt from deaths caused through recklessness and a life spent trying to repay that debt. Terp Tarker carries this in a primordial world with claws instead of hands. The remorse still shows up. The guilt still drives him toward danger nobody's paying him to fight. Marvel dressed up the oldest wound in the company's history, the one first printed in 1962, and hid it inside a joke about a dinosaur in a costume. And somehow, the joke still delivers the gut punch anyway. That's the whole trick behind every version this video has covered. The spider was decoration, the guilt, the responsibility, the debt that never clears. That's the part nearly every universe keeps copying, all the way down to a dinosaur who never met a human being and still somehow inherited the same burden. A Tyrannosaurus Rex named Terp Tarker carries guilt for two innocent dinosaurs he crushed through recklessness 66 million years before Queens exists, carrying the same responsibility Peter Parker learned at his home in 1962. Proof that the spider was always the least important part of the name Spider-Man. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.